Have you ever just been so lost in an activity that time just seems to disappear completely? You're hyper-focused and everything that you do just seems to work perfectly. Well, this is quite a common experience, and it's not just something that happens when you're making music. It could be all sorts of activities, from washing the dishes to doing gardening to working on the computer to whatever. Personally, I find this is quite a common experience when working with Modular Synth, and hours can just disappear very quickly as you're sat there facing the synth and patching the cables and so on. I find this is something that happens quite commonly when working with Modular Synth. Hours just seem to sort of disappear as you're sat facing the rack and patching cables. And for me anyway, it seems to happen more readily with Modular than other methods of music making that I've used in the past. Well, this experience is what's often referred to as flow, a flow state, and it is a coin termed by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote about this in his book Flow, which I think was released in the mid-90s, 1996 perhaps. And then also in other books that he wrote dealing with creativity and so on. So this is what I want to talk about today. It's this sort of super hyper-focused state, this flow state, and how Modular Synth really helps you to get into that state, and also how it can benefit you creatively. Hello, thanks for tuning in and welcome to today's video. So in today's video I want to talk about this flow experience or flow state that is quite commonly associated with creativity, enhanced creativity, and often all sorts of activities, whether it's sports or arts or whatever really. But how it relates to Modular Synth. It's not just about sort of zoning out and having a pleasant time, but there is evidence to suggest that when you experience this state of flow, that you can tap into sort of higher levels of creativity, and it's where sort of like you can reach into yourself and draw out your sort of best ideas and whatnot. So let's start off by describing exactly what flow is. It's probably most commonly associated with a loss of experience of time. So you don't really notice how much time has passed, and it can seem like you've been sat doing whatever you're doing for quite a short amount of time, when in reality an hour or more might have passed. You also find that you have this kind of hyper-focused state where your mind is not wandering off and drifting away and thinking about other things, but you're just purely thinking and concentrating on whatever it is that you're doing. And also you kind of get this sort of feeling that whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to do, everything just seems to be working quite well, and things just seem to fall into place quite easily. You often will sort of hear sports people talk about this as kind of like being in the zone, where maybe their adrenaline's going, whatever, and everything is working in the optimum state, and they are in that moment the best that they can possibly be. So as I say, you can experience this at all sorts of different points, or it doesn't really matter what activity you're doing. There are certain requirements that will make the flow state more likely to happen, but it's just as likely to happen whether you're just working in the garden or washing the dishes or whatever it might be. So what are the ingredients of flow? What needs to happen to try and increase the chances of entering this sort of hyper-focused state? There's several requirements for flow to happen, but I'm just going to mention a few of them. So one of the most important is that you have clear goals. So you know exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve, and you know when you've met those goals. So in terms of modular synthesis, that could be that you're trying to create a certain patch, or maybe you're working within a certain constraint that you've set yourself, but you know exactly what it is that you're doing. You're aiming to do something, and you've got a purpose in mind. So you're not just sort of aimlessly pashing away without any reason to what you're doing. Another requirement is that you get immediate feedback. So whatever it is that you're doing, there's some way of you getting feedback so you can hear the results, or whether the results are good or bad straight away, and then you can make further adjustments. And again, in Modular Synth, that's really apparent, because as soon as you start patching things and changing things, you can hear immediately because the sound changes, so you get feedback straight away. There also needs to be a balance between your skill level and the challenge that you're facing. So if something is really, really difficult, then you're likely to get frustrated and give up. But then the flip side of that is, if the activity is too easy, then you get bored, and so you give up. So there needs to be this balance where it's a little bit challenging, but it's within your sort of skill range to be able to complete the task. It helps if you're in an environment where you're not going to be distracted. So whether that's sort of shut away in the studio or whatever it may be. But it's really important that you have that time free of distraction. So I actually believe that Modular Synth is really well suited to inducing this kind of flow state. There's something about it that actually means that it quite easily fulfills a lot of the requirements for inducing flow. So, I mean, one of the obvious things is that Modular Synth is very tactile, it's very hands-on. So you are plugging things in, you're turning knobs, you're shifting sliders, whatever, but you're interacting with the machine, and so because of that tactile interaction, you're getting immediate feedback. So straight away we're ticking off one of the things there through the way that Modular Synth works. But also the level of challenge that you set yourself is completely open-ended. So because, again, the way that Modular Synth is, and the way that it's very customizable, and it's really sort of tailored to what you want to do with it, you can make Modular Synth, or you can make a patch that you're working on as challenging or as easy as you want. You could patch up the same thing that you've done many times and achieve the same result, or you could try and do something completely different, and you could sort of let go, and if you do sort of follow the sound and let yourself explore what's happening, then you probably will hit these sort of occasional stumbling blocks where you don't actually know what to do. And that little bit of challenge, that little bit of puzzle, is what keeps you interested and pulls you further into this flow experience. It's also possible to set yourself clear goals, which is another requirement, because you can set yourself a little challenge, or you can set yourself a little constraint of maybe you're going to work with a certain number of modules, or you're going to work with a certain type of modules, or maybe you've got a theme that you're trying to work around with your patch. And so it gives you an immediate goal that you've got to work to, and again, that is something that really pulls you into that flow state. Now, if you're working with Modular and you've not kind of had this sort of experience where you're drawn into what you're doing, or maybe you have, but it's only really happened a little bit, then how can you kind of improve the environment around you, or what can you do to make sure that you actually have this experience? Well, it's basically just trying to hit those requirements. So remove distractions, put your phone somewhere out the way, keep the computer off so you're not tempted to go and scroll through YouTube or whatever, watching videos like this one. Try and keep your area, I'm pretty bad at this, but if you try and keep your area sort of tidy a little bit, so you haven't got to hunt for things. If you need something, you've got it there straight away. So that's one thing you can do, so try and avoid distractions. I'm fortunate enough to have this room here, which is my studio, where I can shut the door, and people in the house know that if the door is shut, then it means I'm working on something, and they're not going to come in and disturb me unless it's an emergency, apart from the dog. The dog doesn't know that, and he often comes in and he will scrape and scratch at the door, and he'll come in and cause a nuisance. But he's the only one. Everybody else knows not to disturb when the door's shut. So it's, removing those distractions again, really important. Try setting yourself some kind of goal, some kind of intention. It doesn't need to be too tight, because sometimes if you have too tight a goal or too tight a plan, then you can sort of frustrate yourself by not being able to achieve it. But if you have some sort of direction, something that you're set out with, or something that you set out on in the beginning, that will help you a little bit as well. And the best way to do that is to have some kind of constraint where you're going to add some sort of limiting factor to what you're doing, which is going to constrain you a little bit and take away some of your freedom of choice, which then presents a problem that you've got to solve, and that leads to higher levels of creativity and leads to this flow state. And hopefully you will notice, if you do enter this, or if you do have this experience, you'll notice, because you know you'll feel yourself become more focused. You'll feel yourself sort of slip into the zone. You know, you're not worried about other things. Does it matter if you notice? Is it important that you notice? I don't think it is, and you probably won't notice at the time. It's something that you notice afterwards, I would say, because in the moment you are focused on what you're doing, so you're not necessarily going to be focused on having thoughts about being in a flow state. So it goes without saying really that you probably shouldn't notice that you're having this experience, but afterwards you might look back and go, oh, actually I think I did have this flow experience. And often you will associate it with having quite a pleasurable time, maybe coming up with ideas that you wouldn't normally come up with, or producing a piece of music that's a little bit more interesting than you expected to, and that ultimately is, of course, the point of it all. But you know, at the same time, it's not a guaranteed thing, and if it doesn't happen, you know, that's fine as well. You can sometimes sit with your modular for quite a long time and get very frustrated and not be able to sort of achieve what you're hoping to, and you know, the magic just doesn't happen. And that's fine as well. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. And you know what? If on those days, sometimes I will sort of, you know, just go and do something else and then come back later. A classic example, I think last week, where I was working on an idea and I was really trying to sort of force this idea for quite a few hours, getting quite frustrated, not really getting to the point where I wanted it to. And in the end, I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to switch it off. I'm going to go away and do something else. And then I came back a little bit later on, the next day or the evening or whenever it was, and something just seemed to click in that moment. Maybe, you know, it was having a little break for a while, but something just seemed to click, and you know, the music started happening as I wanted it to, and the result was much better. And you know, I entered into that kind of state. So you know, if it doesn't happen, that's okay, because sometimes you know you just have sessions where things don't seem to work, and that is perfectly normal as well. However, I do think it is important to sort of try and work, or whatever it is you're trying to do, to try and do it sort of regularly. The more regularly you get into the habit of patching and working with your synth, the more likely it is that you're going to enter this state, because you're going to reach the point where you know, you're working at that sort of balance of your skill level more quickly, and then also be able to move beyond that as well. So I hope you found this video interesting, and hope it gives you a little bit of insight maybe into this idea of flow. And if you've ever kind of noticed yourself you know, having this experience but you didn't necessarily know what it was, then hopefully that gives you a little bit of an explanation for that. If you're interested in you know, delving a little bit deeper into this topic, I recommend looking out for the books by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's got a number of books. I think one of them is called Flow. There's another one called Creativity. Both of those are really good books and worth a read. But yeah, so try and remember, if you're trying to get this, you know, have this experience, just try and remember some of those points. Try to be free of distractions. Try and set yourself some clear goals, maybe using some constraints, that sort of thing. And hopefully you will be able to have this experience as well. Really interested to know your thoughts on this. If you have, got experience of, you know, this flow state, then Tell me about it in the comments. You know, are there certain little rituals maybe that you have that you go through when you're working with your modulars to sort of help you get into the zone? Yeah, I'll be really interested to read those in the comments. So thank you for watching, and once again, if you have enjoyed this video, then please do hit the like button and the subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you in the next video. Cheerio.